All right. And I'm sorry for the view. This is the view from my iPhone. It's doing its best. But all right. So welcome all of you for the October 2024 meeting of the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association. My name is Ernest. I'm the president of the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association, PPNA. And let me just double check. I saw two board members. Wait, there might be more. Hang on here. Okay, so far two board members. I'm expecting some others to join us. One is Lindsey Graham, who is the VP representing the Patterson Place sector. And then we also have our secretary, Elena. Now, with that all being said, let's just get right into it. So our guest speaker tonight is Mark Parker, who is the Democratic candidate for District 1 City Council. You may have heard that there's some redistricting going on and that what was once District 1, which is currently Zeke Cohen's district, has moved, the boundaries have moved. The short version is that if you are south of Baltimore Avenue, then you are still in District 1. If not, you are in District 13 with Antonio Glover. Am I correct about that?
South of Baltimore Street in the 1st District, east of East Avenue, like my gentleman here, in the 1st District.
Gotcha.
So it's a little.
So we're still there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But if you're on Baltimore Street,
If you're on the south side of Baltimore Street, you're in the 1st District. If you're on the north side of Baltimore Street, you're in the 13th with Tony Glover.
I'm across from the park.
If
Looking
you're
south.
if you're
If you're
even
across
number,
from the park, then
Looking south.
you would be in the
yeah,
13th.
then you're in the 13th.
Okay, thank you.
That all being said-
East Avenue to,
East Avenue is the dividing line above Baltimore Street. So like if you're chugging along Baltimore Street going eastbound up the hill, you get to East Avenue, you take a left and go up all the way to Monument Street. That's all the 1st District. So Elwood Park, the eastern slice of PPNA.
So the district makes a bend.
A big
Yeah.
a big left hook.
and south of Baltimore.
South of Baltimore Street's in the 1st District,
Still the first one.
all the way over to Chester.
So with all that being said, I wanted to invite Mark here. He is running. You're running unopposed in the general. Is there,
There wasn't much I could do about it, but nobody else decided to run, so here we are.
no Republicans. So his chances are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give you all a chance to hear from. I suppose it's called councilman designate. What? Well, anyway.
I just can't.
Probably future councilman Mark Parker. I think I can say that. And hear what he has to say, and then give you all a chance to ask any questions about what's on your mind. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to him.
I appreciate it, Ernest. And I just logged into the Zoom too, so that, anyway, so people can maybe see me too online. It's good to be with you all. My name is Mark Parker. Thanks, Ernest, for the introduction, the invitation to be here. I've been on this side of town since the summer of 2009. Came here in August of that year to take over a small dying congregation, Highlandtown Lutheran Church, and to reconnect with the community and rebuild and all the rest. So moved in 2012 on Highland Avenue, the 100 blocks south, and have been here ever since. 2 kids both of whom were at Patterson Park Public Charter School, now just one because our son is a freshman at Poly. So kind of navigating high school here in the city for the first time, and the bus ride across town and all the rest. And then Sarah is in 5th grade over at PPCS. That's been a really good experience. A lot of work really closely with PPNA over the years, all kinds of different projects, initiatives. This past year in particular, so also worked really closely with Friends of Patterson Park. So been involved with Park After Dark, a lot of youth sports in the park. I was on the Patterson Park Master Plan team back when we did that work in 2015, 2016, representing Highlandtown. I served on the Highlandtown Community Association board for about 8 years, and so PPNA and HCA up until the pandemic were kind of my go-to every single month that I was here and participating in it. Pandemic changed schedules for a lot of us, so I've only been an occasional visitor with PPNA since then, but glad to do it. Ran for city council, won the election, the Democratic primary election in the spring, and so I am the only person on the ballot in the fall, November 5th, and so the swearing-in day is December 5th downtown. I'm one of 4 new council members out of 14. And then our city council president will be one Zeke Cohen, assuming he wins his election. And so he's been serving obviously in the first district, now will be serving as the council president. So he and I have worked close together over the years, and look forward to working together in a new way. My background, kind of neighborhood policy wise, the things that I'm excited about all kinds of stuff and what makes neighborhoods work. I initially came to this community. I'm a Baltimore City native, grew up in South Baltimore, but I came here in the fall of 2002 through 2004 to work with Robin Lewis and Edward Kowski and Bill Henry and Mark Tuff, who were all active in PPNA and in the Patterson Park Community Development Corporation, which led a ton of revitalizing work, both commercial but especially residential, buying, rehabbing vacant homes, selling them, helping organize the community. So I came here to learn from them about what it looks like to stabilize and transform communities. And I've been excited about that work before then and ever since. So I serve on the board of the Southeast Community Development Corporation. I serve as chair of their housing team. And so we've been doing a ton of that work in Elwood Park. So just a little north and east of here, and now into McGillivray Park. Again, buying vacant homes, fixing them up, selling them, also investing in existing homeowners and driving investment in local parks and working on bulk trash and kind of comprehensive neighborhood interventions to help stabilize and strengthen the community. So that's what I get really excited about. I also have a deep background in work alongside immigrants and refugees. I speak Spanish, and obviously in our community, it's a huge part of the work that we do here is to help people who are new to our city or new to our country be successful and find ways to connect, to build community, and achieve the goals they have for themselves and for their families. And then, as I said, a lot of background in housing, community development, and then education. So I mentioned my kids are in local public schools, but I also helped to found the Highlandtown Preschool, which serves 56 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. I have been on a bunch of school family councils and just done a lot of work supporting, especially our local pre-K to 8th grade schools and supporting that work. So that's kind of background I'm doing. The process is such that we don't have our committee assignments yet. I mean, the election, isn't for a few weeks. And so I don't know what committees of the city council I'll be on. The committees haven't even been formally named yet. Zeke Cohen is working through that. But hopefully I'd be in a position to address the things I mentioned, right? Especially work with children and youth and education, work on community redevelopment, so housing issues, economic redevelopment, and land use, transportation, a deep transportation background. I mostly get around by bike. I also use public transit a lot. We're a one-car household, so that's a big part of how we navigate the city. I want to make sure that that's a safe and reliable, there's safe and reliable options for everybody in our community by choice or by necessity. So, yeah, that's the big picture. Ernest mentioned maybe we want to talk about ballot initiatives that are, for some of you have already voted, which is great. Some of you still maybe have not, want to talk about that. There's also a new vacant housing bill that was just introduced in City Council 2 weeks ago today. I haven't been there for that, and so have been kind of tracking that bill. It's really important. My only regret is I was hoping it would happen until I got there and I could dig in and it could be one of the first things I worked on. But the mayor also recognizes its importance, so they are trying to get it done now before the new council takes office, which is no time like the present.
Yeah, so if we could, I actually would like to put those to the side for a second and just open the floor up to anybody. What are the concerns that you have? What would you like Mr. Parker to know about? And the floor is yours to ask any questions that you want.
I had a question about what you talked about with public transport. I bike every day up and down the city, and it's really hard sometimes, especially to drive with traffic and getting bike lanes and protected bike lanes are things that are really important to me. So what are your plans, or plans that are already in place to make District 1 more bike friendly?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, this is how I get around. But aside from I say that not because I do it means that everybody needs to, but I do have the personal experience of what it looks like to safely or not safely navigate. It's also how my kids get around, right? So they get to and from school, it's how they get to and from their grandparents' house down in South Baltimore. We've come a long way, relatively speaking, to where we were 15 years ago. We have a long way to go, especially for folks that are in other cities in this country and elsewhere and recognize what it looks like to have even like a base level commitment to accessible transportation for all kinds of different users. Fundamentally, it's unsafe, right? To get lots of places. The big projects here that are in the works are the Greenway Trail Network, which is, if you don't know that, look it up. It's a fantastic initiative. Here, what it will do is it'll connect Canton Waterfront Park along Boston Street down near Canton Crossing, and then up the Haven Street corridor along an old Norfolk Southern train line, rail line, and then into the bottom end of Herring Run Park, where there's already an existing trail that goes to Lake Montebello. Eventually, what it does is it creates a loop around the entire city, connecting all the major parks. So the Inner Harbor and the Harborfront and the Harbor Promenade, up to Herring Run, to Lake Montebello, across to the Johns Hopkins area and the park there that's escaping my name right now. To Wyman Park, then across to Druid Hill, then across the Leakin, and then you already have the existing trail that goes down the Gwynns Falls to Carroll Park and then back to the Mill Branch, right? So like that's the big loop bisected by the Jones Falls Trail, right? So that's huge. It's been really slow progress. Where it currently stands for our stretch, which is the Haven Street corridor, is that the city has been negotiating actively with Norfolk Southern about a price. I heard a year ago they agreed upon a price, and then a year later they're like, hey, we're almost at the right price. But there has been slow progress on that front, and it's one of the priority areas for the coalition that's backing it. Say like, hey, listen, this is low-hanging fruit because there's no community resistance. It's like running through an industrial area with very little access to recreational facilities. Like this is a win for everybody. Let's make it happen. Other parts of the trail have experienced more back and forth. The other big thing here is Wolf Street in Washington. So those are familiar. They're one-way, two-lane roads that people drive really fast on. It doesn't help that in the section through Butcher's Hill and North Fells Point, it's pretty steep hill. So people drive really fast on it. There's been a bunch of pedestrian injuries and other injuries there, crashes into buildings, crashes into steps, crashes into people. So the proposal there is that Wolf Street would become single lane. They would just remove travel lane. The parking would be pushed out. And so you just have one travel lane going southbound on Wolf, and you just create some extra space there next to the curb. People can put planters out, they can put some chairs, whatever you want to do. And then Washington Street will again lose a lane, but it'll be, so you'll have one northbound lane plus a two-way cycle track. You'll take that second lane and turn it into a two-way cycle track from the waterfront all the way up to Clifton Park, right? So a long way up. And so especially helping anybody going north-south, it's really hard to get north-south safely here. I go up Edison Highway. That's the best option. It's not a great option. Washington Street's the second best. Again, people fly on Washington Street, not a great option. We have tons of people, pedestrians and cyclists trying to get to work at Johns Hopkins and home from work, or get all the way up to Clifton Park for whatever purpose. And so, so that's the big thing here. What's missing at that point is to say, listen, like there's not a great east-west connection to downtown, whether you're going down for work or you're going down for cultural events or whatever the case is. So Baltimore Street has some paint on the grounds that says, please don't die here. And we had a neighbor who did die there earlier this year, right? So that doesn't work very effectively. Bank Street and Gulf Street are the two safest routes because they're one-way, single-lane, quiet neighborhood streets. And so I think the big push there is to like, hey, is there some way to get that into the mix for like a safe, it'll be great to have a safe north-south connection on Washington. Can we get something that connects Patterson Park to downtown with a little bit more safety than we have right now? So, yeah, there's bigger picture stuff across the city. I would say in general, the mayor's administration has like slow played all of it, seemingly for political reasons, is to try to like limit the amount of blowback they've got from communities that have been very vocal, even though it's actually a really small number of people, which is the way that these things work. Coming out of the election, where a lot of the people who didn't win were like very anti-bike and like tried to run on that and stir people up and didn't get very far electorally. The hope is that people can see like, oh, hey, this isn't actually, yes, there are some people upset, but maybe we can move forward with a little bit more energy on building out this network, so we get to our goals faster.
That's super great.
I answered long. I'm gonna try to be better, but thanks for the question.
Could I do a really quick follow-up? I'm sorry.
Go for it.
The second piece is, I don't know how much you can do about this, but Bikemore is like a super great resource to get help with bike upkeep, but the closest place, I think for me at least, was Lake Montebello, and I had to get my deacon to drive me out there. It was too much. So I don't know if it's possible to give Bikemore more energy around a bike shop near Patterson Park for all the bikers that are super close
Yeah.
with upkeep. So
Right, so our only Southeast bike shop at the moment had been Joe's on Broadway, which is no more. We did have one in Hamilton for a hot second. I would give full credit to Zeke. As soon as Joe's announced they were leaving, Zeke's staff reached out to Baltimore Bike Experience, the name of that shop? Baltimore Bike Works. And so they've been trying, I mean, like, I was on emails today with them and this is all Zeke, I'm just bystander for this, but like Zeke's team is actively working with Southeast CDC and Hamilton Main Street to find a storefront in Southeast Baltimore for them to put up a show. So, yeah, especially if we get, when we get the Greenway Trail coming through there, right, like, we need an anchor to kind of support that. So.
Okay, other questions?
How can we get, obviously you're not there yet, but who do we actually talk to get trash cans placed on the corners all over Baltimore City? I've never lived in a place until I moved here where the entire city is just covered with trash on the sidewalks, the streets, it's everywhere. I've never seen it anywhere in my life. And I called a couple of times and asked if they could put trash cans on some of the corners in our neighborhood. And I got a reference number and all that sort of thing, and then nothing happened. I called back later and I talked to a lady several weeks later, and she said, oh, I see you, blah, blah, blah. And still, and it seems to me like if there were, I've been up in other parts of Canton and seeing a big pink city trash cans on the corners, and there's not as much trash on the street. So is it just because people are lazy as shit and won't take their trash and put it somewhere and they just chunk it on the ground? If there's cans, people will do it. And it seems like a minor thing, but there's rats all over the city. You know, when I walk out the door to take my dog for a walk and I see rats hauling ass down the street, I'm like, Jesus, if people would just pick their trash up, you wouldn't have this problem. It's a sanitation issue.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the question. We do have an expert in the room with us, so I'll defer to him in a moment. But let me start with this. So I'm glad you mentioned the pink trash cans. So the pink trash cans were installed by a joint effort of Highlands on Main Street and the Highlands Community Association. We applied for a grant. We got the grant. We had local artists design them. We had local artists fabricate them, and then we installed them. That was a really great process, but also like it took a lot of legwork on the community side to make that happen. It wasn't a call to City Hall. It was, hey, we're going to do all of this work. We're going to get them installed and choose locations. We're going to do community outreach. Like we're going to tackle all that. Friends of Passion Park did the same thing, supported by PPNA and others, to get a ton of new trash cans installed inside the park, right? But they did grant funding for that, and they fundraised for it, and they did the work. So there's a path forward to do a mass, in addition to like individual requests for a corner, there's a path forward for communities to do like a mass commitment to the installation of street trash cans, right? And there's money out. I mean, there are grants that you can do them. The challenge has always been, both in Highlands Down and elsewhere, is making sure the city empties them, city DPW, right? Empties them on a regular enough basis that they don't become even bigger source of problems, right? So
Yeah, our neighborhood.
yeah,
They brought more trash, so it's worse.
Right. Yeah, so like the one side without the other, right? The installation without upkeep, right? And also without the education and even the enforcement of people who are taking household trash out to put in cans, right? If there's not some education about that and enforcement of people who do it, they fill up in 2 seconds. That happened across the street from me. So like right at Highland Pratt's where I live, we have 2 bus stops there really active. I mean, it's the Navy, it's the 22. It's the blue, it's the 22, and then the orange is the next block over. So we have street trash cans at each bus stop, and they fill up real fast, right? So they get emptied twice a week, and even that's not quite enough because people are putting household trash in it. And so I know both Zeke's office and previous offices had to work really hard to fight to get those new cans put into rotation and have them picked up enough for them to actually like be part of the solution. So I certainly will commit me and my staff to do that work alongside communities that want to fight for it. I will say the other thing on the first part, on the community side, there has often been mixed opinions about whether people want them, and which is fine. There's always mixed opinions about things. It's not a panacea, right? It's not it's not an obvious solution because sometimes they do attract more than the city can actually handle. But making sure that you have organized neighbors, and if there's business owners impacted, like it's by them, making sure that they are 100% on board, not just for the installation process, but also for the calling when it's overflowing, right? And getting it in the 3-1 system and kind of being the advocates for it to work long-term is like, it's the hard work, but it's good work. So, and long-term, it's been successful on it. I mean, it took a lot of effort, but it's been successful on it. I mean, it's made a difference. You want to say more?
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Larry Dunley. I'm from Department of Public Works. And some of our biggest problems are that residents, either from the neighborhood, because they don't put out their trash on, it's not even the days that they don't put it out before the trash man gets there, or they put it after. The other part is they ride through the neighborhoods as they're in their car, and they'll bring a whole trash bag, drop it right there. So it looks like, well, wait a minute, they never picked it up. Now we have trucks that go in, and in most cases, they travel the streets every day and pick up those cans. What happens is when you call it in, you look at the can, it's full. Later that day, it's full again, but we've already picked it up. It's not the same trash, okay? So to be able to make a long story short, you call it into 311, that's really not gonna help you at the level you'd like, because there's a truck coming back the next day. And then when it goes into the system, it seems like nothing is happening, okay? So what we've done with communities is better, and I say better. It's easier for you to go to your community association when you're putting together, saying, we're gonna buy so many cans, we're gonna where can we put them? We talk, and I say we, power stronger than me, higher than me, discuss how they're gonna put it in. We will pick them up. We have some communities just lately that did the sun cans.
Oh, the sun compactor ones?
Yeah,
Solar power compactors.
the solar cans. And they asked us, said, okay, we put them in, we asked, where are you gonna put them? We're gonna put them in so, okay, we will come in and pick them up. But that's a negotiation, I said negotiation, that's a conversation that the community association has with, and I always say it's easy for an individual to call and say, this is a mess, but it's harder for you to get action than a community association. You have your power in numbers, okay? So I'd like to get your name and number where you're talking about, because I totally understand. I'm not originally from Baltimore, but I went in other cities where they don't have any cans on the corners. They have them in the middle of the block. I was in San Antonio and I'm like, there's no trash. And I saw the cans in the middle, which made people have to go to the middle of the block rather than pulling up. When they pull up in their cars at a light, there's nothing to throw it out to. So yeah, that's just a thought though. I mean, like I said, I'm not in a position to turn around and say, oh yeah, tomorrow this is my idea and we're gonna go with that. But this is what other cities have found. And Baltimore is, I would say there are more people who ride through Baltimore and drop trash than the individuals who live in your neighborhood.
I don't doubt. I
Okay?
will say this, 311, I moved here in May, and I've probably been on 311 100 times. And those guys, they're just like this. They're out there, I'm always calling about the alleys.
Mhm.
You know, because these people, like I called today, somebody must have brought a truck up one of the alleys.
Yeah.
And it was clean. Your guys had been there 2 days before and it was spotless, looked great. And my wife and I drove by today and went, holy shit, you know, I couldn't
Right.
believe it.
Right.
And
You have a tendency to lose your language.
Pardon me?
It's okay, we don't have any children here.
You know,
All right.
I apologize for that.
no, you don't.
I spent a career in a police car and my language is just all over the place. But anyway, I want to say your people are great. they're on the money, they come out there really quick and they take care of the alleys and, I don't have any complaints about DPW, they're wonderful.
Yeah, the alley cleaning is fast.
Oh, yeah. they're
And
all-
see, one will say real quickly, one of the things that we have too is, okay, people see somebody in a trash truck and, a senior, older adult in the neighborhood says, hey, can all that trash over there, you pick that up? Well, he's not allowed to do that. We have a whole separate unit that comes out and picks up trash in the alley and dumping and all that. Because if he does, on his GPS, it will show that he went over here. And he had like 200 and some stops to make, so he doesn't make them. They look on the computer and say, okay, we'll give you a chance, straighten that out. Next time it happens, we got a whole line of people here wanting a job. Because when you get complaints, nobody wants to hear that an individual was helping a grandmother. Nobody, you don't want to hear that. I mean, you're paying for your stuff to be picked up. So, yes, I get it, but let's talk.
I just want to also let you know that PPNA won a grant for, among other things, we got $750 to get mobile camera units that can be just set up and installed somewhere to get footage. And the idea is that, as you have seen, sometimes people illegally dump. And we want to know where those areas are so that we can set up the camera there and, catch those people and get some enforcement on them. And then, a lot of the times when that happens, then they start dumping elsewhere and we can move the cameras elsewhere. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The bureaucracy of the state has not given us that actual money yet, so we haven't bought the cameras yet. But when we do, it belongs to us, and we want to hear from all of you. Where should we lay these out? Okay, we're probably going to get 2, maybe 3 cameras, and we want to hear from you where they should be, and we will let you know when they become available. All right. So, other questions for future Councilman Parker?
Can I ask one more?
Go for it.
I'll try, I don't want to monopolize the meeting.
Okay.
Code enforcement for violations on residences.
Okay.
Without putting out the address, I called in a violation on a residence in my neighborhood. There's some dangerous stuff at that house, physical things on the home, and got a reference number and all that, and nothing happened. And then I got an email from the city with my reference number. It said this has been addressed by the inspector, blah, blah, blah. And then it said, there are open violations on this residence. And I got on the website and I pulled it up, and my code or my call is not referenced on the system yet, but there were 3 open code violations, same kind of violations on that house going back to 2021. And it clearly states on there that if they're not taken care of within 30 days, they can be fined up to $500 a day. And I'm like, who's enforcing this stuff and why isn't it been addressed? Not just on this house, but I understand from some of my neighbors, this is going on all over the city. Is there not someone actually enforcing these violations on these houses? And how do we find out when it's going to get done and who's responsible for actually enforcing those codes? When they send an inspector out there, somebody's got to follow up on it and say, you guys haven't dealt with this. Here's your $500 fine. They're going to start rolling.
Yeah, so the particular delay or lack of action is on the initial inspection and like violation notice being posted, or is it on the follow-up with actual penalty, like financial penalty? Like, where are you seeing the lack of the action that we need?
Any enforcement. They were really quick to go out there and do an inspection, because I got an email within 10 days that said an inspector has addressed this. There's open violations at this residence, and I got online, found out how to get online and track them.
Right.
And there was one in 2023, one in 22, and one in 21. They're still open. They haven't been addressed.
It didn't show a resolution for them. It didn't say this was addressed, this was
No.
remediated, this was closed out.
And I
Did
talked
it
to
say the amount of the fines that were outstanding on it?
just one of them said, failure to address these and remedy them within 30 days
Yeah.
can result in a $500 fine per day. after that. And they're still open, there's still people living in this place, which doesn't have running water. I know it doesn't because the guy's always coming up and trying to use the hose dam on the front of my house
Yeah,
to
yeah.
fill up his buckets.
Right.
The place is a dump.
Yeah.
You know, there's dangerous stuff on top of the garage that literally falls off into the alley, and it's not being addressed. And I'm like, why?
Does it have a vacant building notice?
No, it's not vacant. There's a couple
Well,
of crackheads living inside.
Yeah, no, whether people are living in it or not, so vacant building refers to like the state of the structure and whether it's suitable for human habitation. Doesn't necessarily unfortunately reflect whether there are people in there or not. Yeah, no, you'll send me the particulars on that one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll see where it is. So like the violations go to the environmental control board, but like it's really easy to kind of ignore it, right? Long term, like you ignore it, you let the fines add up. You increase the severity of some of the other, I mean, you get a vacant building notice, other things, then you take the property. I mean, like fundamentally, in the end, like if people are just gonna completely ignore code violations, you have squatters in the building, the owners just don't care and ignore it. Then eventually the city can only resolve it by taking the property, securing it, and then putting it in the hands of somebody who's gonna rebuild it. I mean, that's I won't say it's the end goal, but it's the end outcome that can actually move things forward when you have a landowner that doesn't care.
Any other questions?
I actually have a question.
Go for it.
You might have some insight on this. I'm on the 2400 block of East Baltimore Street, and we had a lot of attempted break-ins and a lot of drug use, like middle of the day in our back alleyways. And we were all thinking, let's gate off the alleyways. A couple of other blocks have done that.
Yeah.
I don't know the path to take to get that
I can
done.
get you that information.
Oh, really? I thought it might be a.
I can put you in touch
Bureaucratic.
with somebody who's doing it right now, Robin Lewis, and also some other people who live on the blocks that have done alley gating.
Really?
So-
And you all are currently doing it.
We have,
We got two
we
of them
also
right
have,
now.
Yeah.
the form that it takes to get the whole thing started, so, before I leave, exchange emails, yeah, I can get that to you before the week is up.
We've
Get
got-
that information.
Cool. Yeah, we've got two. Obviously, it's an alley, so there's two entryways, and then there's like the little skinny entryway all the way down. We just
Is that
thought.
a paper alley? You said another way into the alley?
Yeah, there's like
So
three
it's a
entrances.
paper alley. What they call, it's real small.
Yeah,
In
it's
Baltimore, they call them paper alleys.
paper alleys. Okay. We just thought it would be like, lots of signatures, lots of waiting, lots of.
Well, it's signatures of it's the signatures of your neighbors that's going to have to participate in all this.
That's
Because I mean,
easy.
it looks beautiful, gated up, you take out all your fences, and now you have a whole community like your own little city
That was
within
the
that,
idea.
within that block. Yeah, let's talk.
Okay.
Just because you mentioned Robin Lewis, can you clarify from our last meeting, how much of the grant money is going to Robin Lewis's block to gate her alley and her party? Because it seemed like an awful lot of money that was going to one block. And for it to be a city council representative's block, left a bad taste in mine and several of my neighbors' mouths when we were walking home, because we were in the process of trying to gate our alley, and we would never expect grant money to go to a party for those residents and landscaping and painting of that block. So if you could just.
So I'm not going to speak for Robin Lewis. I will say, first of all, she is a state representative, not a city representative. She applied for the grant as an individual and on behalf of the other neighbors on the block. PPNA did not apply for it. We are just the money. We're just going to be the money holder. So when you apply for that particular grant with the Department of Housing and Community Development, there has to be a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, which is us, PPNA. We otherwise had no control over the decision about where that money goes or anything like that. That was done at the state level. The state apparently looked at that application and said, yes, we will grant this money. Your fiscal sponsor is PPNA. Okay, we will give that money to PPNA to hold in their bank. And then you all living on that block of Potomac, you get to draw down those funds to pay for what you want to do. So when I talk about grants that PPNA applies for, I want to be clear, that is separate. The money that we have gotten to pay for things that we want to do is not going to that. That is something that Robin Lewis has applied for in her own individual capacity. Now, is that the best use of funds? Is that that is something that is a question for you to ask her.
Okay, well, can I ask our representative, how do you feel having a state representative using 50% of the budget to gate their alley and have a party for the residents of that block? When we could use that money, we don't have money for these cameras yet, which would solve a citywide issue instead of having a party for someone. Again, to me, that sounds like a conflict of interest, that a state representative has their thing approved by the state government that they're working in.
Did either of you or anybody else know what exact program that application was sent to? Because it wasn't the safety and security grant program. I don't know. This is the first I've heard about
So
the
you remember
application,
DHCD had those 3 grants. There was one was safety, one was environment, and one was placemaking. I can't remember which one.
Sounds like placemaking.
Probably.
Yeah. It strikes me as I mean, obviously, we all wear different hats, right? We are neighbors. Doug Lewis is a neighbor and resident here and can apply for grants like any other neighbor and group of neighbors can. It does strike me as, there's lots of neighbors on that block who could have been the lead applicants and accomplished the same goal and not given the impression that there was any favoritism. So generally speaking, it's good to avoid, even if nothing is untoward, it's good to make sure that there couldn't even be the perception of it. So, yeah. As to particular, I don't know what grant program it was in particular. This is the first I've heard that they received it, so I won't. But yeah, in general, conflict of interests are real, and the biggest thing is not even give anybody the impression that there could be something questionable, because once you've given that impression, you've lost the ballgame anyway, right? Because you've lost trust. And,
I will say that money has not been dispersed to them either. None of the money from any of those grants has come forward. I just got an alert saying the Secretary of Housing has no, they didn't say finally. I got an email that said there's an important update. So I went in and logged in and it said the Secretary of Housing has signed the approval for your grant. I was like, that's it? That's the upgrade? So I know for a fact that Robin Lewis has not gotten that money either. Now, I can't speak to anything. I can't speak on her behalf. I can't answer for her otherwise. But yeah, just want you to understand those are the facts.
HCA got some of those funds. I feel like in recent years the money didn't show up till like January. I mean, it's fiscal year 25, but like the money didn't show up until like halfway through the fiscal year. But we'll see what it looks like this time around with the rain faster.
Any other questions?
One question. What any, I don't know, direction, I'm thinking about Chanel's question on there, dealing with, like, there seemed to be like a larger wave of addicts this year. Like noticeably greater than 2022, 2021. It's like, it seems to be way more so. I mean, these people sometimes just mind their own business. Sometimes they're trying to open people's front doors. Sometimes they're sleeping. Like they're doing all kinds of stuff. What can we do about that? Besides call the police and then tell them there's nothing we could do. Any
Yeah.
guidance?
Yeah, I think I think you put your finger on this. Is like what's What are the resources we have that can be brought to bear in particular circumstances that can actually accomplish something for the community, for neighbors, from a safety standpoint, for our neighbors who are experiencing addiction, from like a health standpoint, and like their own well-being standpoint. So, and obviously this has been a long-standing issue, decades and decades and decades in Baltimore, and for those who have been following the news, kind of has taken on an increased urgency as kind of like the true scale of human devastation just on the death side, the overdose death side, has come into focus in recent years in a way it was mostly ignored for like the last 5 or 6 years. So there is increasing attention from city government, from the health department, but also from legislators, from the mayor's office to address the cost of addiction, both on a community level, like you're talking about, on an individual level, but also citywide. The city's big effort to this point has been to participate very aggressively in lawsuits and legal action against drug companies that benefited from spreading addiction across the city, across the country. The city just rested its legal case, I think, yesterday or today, I guess, because Monday. On that front, we've already had a bunch of settlements there, so like hundreds of millions of dollars are already coming through. We'll see what comes through for the companies that decide to take it to trial. The mayor has announced a framework to disperse those funds in ways that, I mean, ideally will be equitable and effective around the city. That's going to be where the main action is on the city side. To say like, hey, there's going to be a committee of folks, neighborhood residents, public health officials, a few elected officials that are going to be sitting around that table deciding what initiatives get funded and in what ways that huge influx of resources will be deployed to try to save lives, to try to stabilize communities, and try to help our neighbors. Right? It also opens up, anytime a big bunch of money comes to the city, it opens up the opportunity for that money to be not used effectively at all, or to be used in sketchy ways, or in ways that like are rewarding, nonprofits that people have relationships with, or people who have a connection here, a connection there. So it's going to bear a lot of scrutiny from me, but hopefully from all of us. Like that, we can't afford to waste that money. Just like with ARPA, and ARPA had some hits and some misses, right? And so my hope is the mayor's office has learned from that process, and this will be a little bit more focused, a little bit more transparent, right? In terms of how we address this huge public health and public safety crisis. On a house by house, neighborhood by neighborhood basis, it becomes a question of are there can we identify particular reasons why behaviors have changed that we could particularly address? So a house has become vacant, right, or open to public entry, and so all of a sudden there's a rotating casket, there's been a death in the family, and like the matriarch who like held that house down, now it's in the hand of a grandson or a granddaughter who's in the middle of addiction, and so that house has now become this magnet for criminal behavior, or antisocial, or community destructive behavior. What are ways that we can put code enforcement to work, bring in the city resources, both from a health department perspective, but also from a police department perspective, to say like, no, like this is what has happened in this house is driving a bunch of issues in this area, right? So you can sometimes identify particular problem locations that then give the city, once it's geographically specific, you can try to leverage a few more resources than just like hey, there's a group of people experiencing addiction who kind of float between these alleys. Like once you can narrow it down to some concrete place that is exacerbating that, then you can start to deploy a few more resources. The other thing is, so the city's 988 response, like I speak to lots of police officers about this, community members, and also paramedics and other first responders. So the city has instituted essentially a social work response, a social work mental health addiction crisis response that's not police and it's not paramedics, that's designed to try to connect people with resources that could actually not just kind of stabilize them in the moment, but like help them have a path forward. Baltimore Crisis Response handles that. It's been a relatively new initiative. There's some initial stats out about how many 911 calls converted and all the rest. So it's new, it's small, it needs more resources. My hope is that it will be much better resource because of these funds coming from the addiction settlements or from the drug settlements. That you could really build that out as we have 3 genuine options for intervening in neighborhood crises, right? We have a social work response, we have a public safety response, and we have a medical response. And then having that third part, one, it allows police and firefighters to do the work that they're trained to do, and it also gives us better options to respond to our neighbors in crisis.
So I'm getting a message from Ms. Cheryl, who is our VP for the East Sector. Ms. Cheryl, did you have a question? I do see a
had
lot
a
of.
comment earlier, but we've like gone all the way past that. I don't know if you want to go back or not, but I just wanted to say, whoever that was kept emphasizing Robin Lewis state delegate. Robin Lewis is a citizen, and just like the rest of us can write a grant to do something in her neighborhood. It's not like she's getting any special consideration because she's an elected official.
Yeah, but half the money is going to this grant, including a party. I don't feel that the residents of the
It
district should be
is,
paying
so
for a
just to be
party.
factual, it is not half the money.
You said we got $90,000 from the
Mhm.
grant. $45,000 of it you said was going to Robin Lewis.
No, she got an additional
It's
45,000.
completely different. Two
Completely
grants.
different.
The
Completely
grants
different,
and
completely
cameras that
separate.
PPNA wrote is about those camera things, and then Robin and her neighbors wrote separate grants.
Yeah.
For 45K that was for their own project.
She and her neighbors, which they have the right to do. And if the grant is funded, however the grant is written, if that includes a party, they're perfectly allowed to do that.
Okay, that's great. I just think it's not a good look.
It's the same placemaking grant that was used for the HCA road grants, and we did the intersection of Elwood and Eastern, right? So like it was a public safety oriented pedestrian safety. So like all the painting and the work that we did there. And then PPNA did the same thing, placemaking here at Baltimore and Linwood.
Yes.
So that same goal, so that's that same source of funds that's doing the alley. It's that same pot, except those were last year's grants, and this, I guess, is this year's grant.
You're entitled to think it's not a good look. I just want to be factual that she is not taking any money away from PPNA. We got $98,000. She's not getting any of that $98,000. She got some other money completely separately. Make sense? Okay.
I'll just, because somebody mentioned in here, and we kind of, I teased at the beginning, so I do want to say a little bit about the vacant housing tax rate that was introduced 2 weeks ago.
Sure, let's bring it up. So
Is that right?
if you don't mind, I'm just going to introduce this. So the city council tomorrow is going to be considering a bill, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I can pull it up. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. I'm sorry, those of you who are on the Zoom, I don't know how to share my screen when I'm using the browser, but it is Council Bill 24-0601. And basically it says that, let's see here. Okay, so if a property is vacant, the taxes on it will be tripled, and then the year after that it will be quadrupled. That's the short version. Now, City Council is soliciting input and testimony. If you want to, you can go to City Council at 10 a.m. tomorrow in order to testify in person. I am not going to be able to do that, so I'm gathering feedback from all community members, including you all, so that we can provide written testimony to the City Council. So if anybody has any viewpoints on this in favor or against, or you want something to be different, we would really like to hear you. And I believe Elena is busy taking notes, as fantastic as always. So I heard somebody on the Zoom saying something.
Oh, that was
I
Elena
have
saying thank you. And Cheryl also raising her hand.
Cheryl, I'm sorry, I did not see you raise your hand, but if you did, go ahead.
I just raised it, Ernest. Nothing to
Gotcha.
apologize for.
Okay, go for it.
I just want to say my only opposition, really not an opposition. I'm in favor of this bill. I am just asking for an exemption for nonprofit organizations. As the executive director of an organization that builds affordable housing, sometimes we pick up vacants and we may have to hold on to them for a while before we can actually raise all the money that we need to do the rehab. And for us to be subject to this fine it's just another headache that we don't need to deal with when we're trying to make affordable houses.
So to give you all some context, Cheryl is, in addition to being a valued member of our board, is the executive director of Charm City Land Trust, which has done a lot of great work rehabbing vacant houses. So her viewpoint is that sometimes they have to own a vacant property and hold on to it for a little while, and having taxes increase on them when they're just doing what they can to turn it around is not something that they need. So that is her viewpoint. I will take any other comments from people in the room. You know, what do you think about this? Has there been a vacant property near you that has affected you? We would like to hear about that as well. Go ahead.
Yes.
I knew as soon as I said that there were going to be people who had, but yes, let's hear it.
Yeah, so there are a number of vacant properties in our vicinity, and one of them in the spring has been occupied by a group of squatters, and the process to ensure that they leave, they're still there, and it's taken months, and Mark has been on some calls and has been on that long email chain that's been happening. But it honestly it not only affects the quality of life of every surrounding neighbor, but one of my best friend's houses burned down in Hamden earlier this week because although it wasn't vacant, there were things that were not addressed in a timely manner. And we all live in our homes are connected. So when folks are occupying a house that they don't care about, and it affects trash, it affects, noise, it affects safety, because there have been situations with guns involved, fights involved, and regardless of how many times we call 911 and try to document all of the, it's not even just nuisance, like all the criminal behavior, it's extremely hard to get folks evicted. And we fully understand why renters' rights exist, and also when folks abuse and find loopholes and use that to their advantage, and then also are living in a way that, again, poorly affects a lot of people. It's not just we're living in this place and we're quiet and we don't care. It's really rippling out. So I am very much in favor of this being passed. It also has to do with the fact that not only are places held vacant, but the way in which it changes hands. I know you, Mindy, can talk.
Yeah,
about that.
I'll add to what Gab said. I imagine, so this house was foreclosed upon, owned by a bank, that bank sat on it for a while, and then it was sold to another bank, and shortly after that, the squatters moved in. And so the process of identifying who the correct owner was, we had to kind of pull some connections there, because the city resources to help you do that on your own aren't updated regularly. I imagine that if someone from the bank was here, they would say something to the effect of, well, the foreclosure process is long, et cetera, et cetera. And to that, I would counter, you need to do something to protect your property, and you have done basically the opposite. They don't come by and visit it regularly. They put a sign in the window talking about how the pipes are winterized, and that is likely what attracted the squatters in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of addressing the fact that sometimes it's not as easy to turn over a property. I totally understand that, but I wonder if there can be a way to hold people accountable for monitoring the properties that they own, to ensure that the people that live near them are not encountering hardship because of it. And so did I touch on basically?
Yeah. And to Cheryl's point, there's opportunity to be nuanced in who this affects. It should absolutely affect individuals who own vacants, but also banks, because of what's happening. is that like all of these vacants are owned by someone, or not all of them, but some of them are, and then it's really hard to get in touch with someone to do something when it comes to the eviction process in court.
Yeah.
Sorry, Larry, I'll get you in just a second. I just really want to know, and we're trying, I'm also conscious of the fact that we need to get out of here by 8 o'clock. So I just would like to know who here in the room, you know, you've just heard what our neighbors said. Does that resonate with you? If you raise your hand.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, good to know. Larry, go ahead.
What added to what you just said, our biggest problem with that as DPW is that the grass grows high. Sometimes it's 8 inches, you get a ticket. I know because I got.
Yeah, I know about that.
But what I'm saying is the problem with that goes with that is that no one's responsible for it.
Right.
You need to call 311 right away in reference to that.
Yeah.
And do not, under any circumstances, cut that grass.
Right.
Because when code enforcement comes out and the grass is cut, there is no more issue.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened,
So,
like
and you're only doing it
Yeah.
because you said, hey, it's next door to me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I get it. We
No,
get
we're
it.
not, so
Okay.
that's the thing, like, trash will be everywhere, they don't throw their trash out on, like, regular days, they just put them in these yellow bins, and then with the wind, it blows everywhere, and it sucks, because we literally we have to walk through the trash,
Yes.
and they keep their dog in the garage, and then sweep the poop out into the alley, and it is infuriating, because obviously, we want to do something about it because we live right there. It's disgusting. But we do call 311, and 311 has been helpful and finds them and gives them citations, but then they don't care.
So, Lindsay brought this up in the chat, and it's relevant to our conversation here. So, like, there's a this is about vacant properties. Like, the definition of vacant property is defined in city law, and it's very specific, and it has to have a vacant building notice. So, and there's a difference between like a vacant property and an unoccupied property, right? Which I kind of alluded to before, right? Like a vacant property is abandoned, unfit for habitation, etc. A house that's in good shape, that's been foreclosed on, that's simply like kind of accidentally unoccupied for a period of time while it's going through the legal process, isn't going to be impacted. It never will be impacted by this tax rate. The other thing too is like, so in the city, Councilperson Ramos submitted legislation or submitted comments, and you can see if you go in Baltimore City's Legistar system, you can see a bunch of the comments that have already been posted for the hearing tomorrow. This is not considered, it's not a short-term solution to like a problem vacant property, right? Whether it's abandoned property, vacant property, whatever. It's not a short-term public safety code enforcement solution. This is about the long-term goal of helping the city to acquire and then acquire, stabilize, and dispose of vacant property as quickly as possible. It's to supercharge that effort across the city for houses that have vacant housing tendencies. So I think there are legal remedies that I've been thinking about to address our situation on East Avenue, right? And say like, hey, there's some real gaps here to address like an urgent situation that this law, as great as it can be, won't connect.
Okay.
But so this really, this isn't a revenue generating thing. The city submitted we don't think any the people that we're going to be charging the extra rates to aren't paying it now, and they're not going to pay it in the future. But what it does is it increases the fines. Like as soon as the quantity of the fines exceeds the value of the house, the city can use interim foreclosure, which is this rapid foreclosure process to acquire the property. So this is designed to get as many properties as possible, racking up as high fees as possible to then get into city sands and then out to organizations like Cheryl's who can then go ahead and develop the property or for-profit developers or others. So it's a property acquisition disposition tool. It's not really a tax tool, and it's not, unfortunately, a public safety or urgent response to like a house that we're worried is going to burn down and cause significant problems. And that continues to be a major issue that I think probably needs some state legislation, but certainly the city side too. So.
Could you explain the difference between vacant and unoccupied again? Like, who are you finding if it's unoccupied versus like vacant versus abandoned? But
yeah,
if it's
so
abandoned, who's the owner? you know.
So there's always an owner of
It's
record,
always owned.
but in most cases, the owner, in most cases with abandoned property, well, most cases with houses that have vacant building notices, oftentimes we have no real contact with the ownership. And so it really then at this point, like you can send, I mean, there's an address on file that says this is the owner, this is the address. You can send mail off, into the US Postal Service and not actually expect any outcome. But you can rack up the fines fast enough and the taxes and other fees fast enough. Every single one of these code enforcement issues, like every single one of those adds up to the point that then once that tally is big enough, then the city can move through interim foreclosure to take it. A temporary, that's like so a vacant building notice. So if you look up like Baltimore City Code Map is a place where you can zoom in and find all kinds of information about individual properties. You can see like I'm currently looking at the PPNA territory and the houses that have vacant building notices. And in general, it's like, in our neighborhood, it's like one a block, essentially. But houses that are empty, including empty for like a long time, for one reason or another, wouldn't necessarily show up on this because the house is secure. It's not falling apart. There's no code enforcement actions against it. I mean, it's just a house that happens to be empty at this moment, right? You can own a house and leave it sit empty for years and years and years, as long as there's not illegal activity happening there, as long as there's not squatters there, as long as
That's
a
the
hole
situation
in water.
for me. We have a house on the corner. It's in great shape.
Yeah.
The lady's been trying to sell it for 2 years.
Yeah.
She refuses to sell it because she wants like $800K. In the meantime, there have been 2 sets of squatters because people just break in, hide out, use it to shoot up or whatever.
Yeah.
They kind of creep off to try to break into our houses, then hide back. You had to get the cops to get them out a couple times. This lady just won't sell.
Right.
Beautiful house.
Yeah.
She wants $1 million or something.
Yeah, sure.
It's
Right.
like, so, I mean, we're kind of like, it's going to happen again, I'm assuming, because it's already happened twice. And we don't know what to do because the cops are like, these guys could be legally here. And I'm like, they're not legally there. They just broke in, but there's no.
Yeah, I mean, it's
kind of like
an owner who is active and engaged and is like actively, on some level or another, addressing like property maintenance issues. And there's no way for the city to legally certainly take the property and like give it to somebody else. And so, I mean, it's not a perfect solution, but I've dealt with similar situations before and have tried to do everything possible to get that person on my side. Right? We had two on Highland Avenue, the 200 block. We had 2 houses that were sitting there like half finished. What had happened was the owner. So I was like, what's going on here? And I started seeing some sketchy things happening. So I looked up the owners. They lived in Essex. They were older. They had a health crisis, right? Husband had a stroke. They were in the middle of the renovations. They meant to get back to it eventually, but it had been sitting there 10 years. Eventually, I caught guys just like pulling copper pipe out and taking it over to Pulaski Highway. So I was like, all right, well, let's do something. And then finally was able to work with them, right? Address the criminal issue of the people stealing, but was able to work with them to like introduce us to some people and like encourage them and connect them and kind of just try to talk some hard truth into them to be like, hey, listen, like, wouldn't it be better if, right, these people who could renovate these houses can take them off your hands, you don't have to worry about it. But it took persuasion and there's no guaranteed success there, right? But
yeah, she doesn't really speak English. She's Chinese and she spends half the year in China.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
It's tricky.
One of the things that and this comes from our experience in Elwood Park, one of the things I'm most excited about or most hopeful for with this new proposed law. So there's a bunch of, every time the Southeast CDC tries to buy a vacant house in Elwood Park, we are bidding against New York or Philadelphia investors who say like, hey, housing property in Baltimore is really cheap. We can buy it really cheap. We can afford to sit on it for 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, do nothing whatsoever. Let the code enforcement like actions file up, pay a fine every once in a while, right? Like not actually do anything, not pull any building permits, not do anything. And like, but maybe in a year or two, we can sell it for twice the $25K we bought it for, and we can just walk away. So there's people that are using that as like, there's abandoned houses where like truly people have wandered away. We have no idea who owns them. There's a bunch of properties that we know who owns them because they bought them 6 months ago at auction, right here in the city, and have no intention whatsoever to actually invest in the house or stabilize or help the community out. So my hope is that this higher tax rate makes the carrying costs of that investment strategy, cost prohibitive, and allows and discourages people from even like hopping into the communities and essentially trying to like leech value and slow down our progress, right? Because like the Southeast CDC or Charm City Land Trust would buy it right now at a lower cost because they're not trying to compete against these people with Philadelphia, New York investment money. Then we have the chance to turn around vacant housing faster. So that's one of my hopes with this, is it discourages some of that kind of predatory investment in changing neighborhoods.
I have a
Yes.
question that may not pertain to everyone here. I don't want to take your time up. I'm in the 100 block of South Potomac Street, and we'd like to get street cleaning. I called 311. They told me to bring it to the community meeting and to see my councilman. So I'm doing both today. I know I have to get a petition up and with the neighbors to sign it. But I'm not sure why they told me to bring it here to PPHA.
So your street does not currently have street cleaning, and you want to get street cleaning, is that correct? Okay. Well, the short answer is, I think Larry right here, who works at DPW, might have answers for you. Do you? I hope you do.
Drum roll. Okay, did you get the form to fill out for all your neighbors to sign to say you want
No.
street cleaning yet?
No, haven't gotten them yet.
Okay.
This just happened this week.
All right, then I'll give you my email address, and my telephone number, so you can text me, so we'll be in straight communication. And I'll get that form to you so that you can have your neighbors sign it, because there is a form you have to do. Certain amount of neighbors, 60%, I think it is, they have to sign saying that they want street cleaning. But one of the biggies about street cleaning is that you have to get your neighbors to buy in, because you have a lot of neighbors that refuse to move their cars. And when that street cleaner comes down the street, if there's 2 cars here, he has to do this and miss half the block. And that's the biggie in the city, because you have people that own 3 cars, 4 cars, 5 cars, all of that. So just want you to know that's what's coming, but we will work closely with you and try to see what we can do. Right?
I've spoken to a David Reddy at the city.
I'll put you, we'll get you in touch with street cleaning.
And then I have to go to the city council
No.
representative?
No, I think they probably just recognize there's no
No.
legislative action,
No.
but I think in general, your councilperson's office can be supportive in kind of walking through the process and making sure that you're doing the right things in the right order and talking to the right folks.
So
So
we're walking them through it. And I mean, you get the form, you do it right, when we tell you exactly what's going on.
They might
There's no hidden agenda here.
It sounds like they might have told you to come to the community meeting just because they knew the right people would be there to talk to you. I don't personally know much about this. I'm learning this at the same time you are. But so if we could just move on to the last part of the agenda. So the election is coming soon. Try not to think too much about it. But here in Baltimore City, there are a number of ballot initiatives. And in particular, there is something called Question H. And I was hoping that Mark would have some things to tell us about it and some guidance to give to us.
So the actual text of question H says, for the purpose of amending Article blah, 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 of the city charter to reduce the number of city council districts from 14 to 8. If the number of city council districts is modified by an approved charter amendment, the mayor shall prepare a plan for council redistricting based on the most recent census. The mayor shall present the plan to the city council on the first day of February, the first municipal election year, following the approval of the charter amendment. We currently have 14 single-member districts. This has not been a forever situation in Baltimore. Back before 2003, we had 6 3-member districts, so we had 18 city council people representing 6 much larger, significantly larger districts in the city. There was a push from the community that thought that fewer council people would be effective at the time, and then also having single-member accountability would be better for kind of an accountable, transparent relationship between that council person and the district. I think that was true. I think there's also been barriers to, there's been a lot of parochialism, a lot of like, well, that doesn't impact my community, so I'm not going to care about it, which does not help the city advance broader legislation to address, citywide issues. But here we are. Mr. David Smith of the Sun and Sinclair Broadcasting, a Cockeysville resident, is almost the entire sole funder of an effort to get this on the ballot, to push out petitions and get people to sign it and put it on the ballot for the fall. I'm sure you could find his feelings about it in various critics and other media. The impact here, so there's not really a financial impact. There's been attempts made like, when you treat this as city council, maybe we save some money. No, because right now my job is part-time, my future job is technically part-time. If you were to increase, I'm gonna be representing 43,000 people. If you increase to 75,000 people, that would be very much a full-time job. So there'll be fewer council people, but they'll be making more money. We will have, we'll have fewer council offices, so less staff that way, but like each council office is gonna have to staff up. Right now, it's gonna be me and 3 full-time people. That would need to be me and 5 full-time people. So in the end, you're not actually saving any money.
City council members are paid how much? 70-something thousand?
Right now it's 74.
Right. So then you take the staff members who are paid a little bit less than that, but let's just say 74,000 for all of them, and then do the math and figure out, like, even in the best case scenario, you reduce the number of city council members, so you're saving a couple $100,000. Baltimore City's budget is over $2 billion. So I just want to put that context out there. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just not much there. So essentially, you're saying, like, do we think that we would be better served by having 8 rather than 14? I mean, there's not a cost thing at all. It's negligible. So the question is, do we think 8 would be better than 14? I mean, it all depends what we're looking for. I'd say it's going to make it a lot harder for me to know what's going on and for me to be responsive to people in the way that I intend to be and plan to be and want to be committed to. There are concerns about representation around the city, that if you shrink the number of people in the council, that it's going to amplify the voices of people who make political donations and neighborhoods where there's a higher property tax rate or higher property tax revenues and other signs that will exacerbate the political inequity and the power inequity that already exists in the city.
Yeah.
So for example, down here, right, like if you take the first district, and we can predict this pretty thoroughly, right? So we'd be adding 30,000, 32,000 new people to the 43,000 people of the district. It means that we're going to add back the full boundaries of PPNA, which is fine, and we'll add that up to Fells Point, and we'll grab the rest of Butcher Hill up towards Commodore John Rogers, and we'll probably grow back towards Little Italy and Harbor East, and then move up a little bit, probably into the Perkins Homes redevelopment in Jonestown, right? Like, we'd add all of that, we'd take Bayview back, that we just gave away, and maybe push a little bit farther up into East Baltimore, maybe up towards Monument Street perhaps. But the bulk of the district would stay the same. It'd be the first district, these core neighborhoods surrounding Patterson Park. That would be the political base, that would be the voices that we had listened to, and predominantly Black communities, north and west of us, and the growing Latino communities in Bayview, would be the ones who would potentially lose some representation, lose some political influence and power. What it really does, it also makes running for office way more expensive, because the biggest driver is dollars to advertise in terms of mail and digital advertising and other targeted stuff. And so if you increase the number of voters in the district, it makes it way more expensive, which means that only people with access to tons of money or significantly higher amounts of money will be able to run and win in these races. And so it takes away the ability for a kind of grassroots campaign to be effective in a city council election. It elevates the power of political donors in particular, of which Mr. Smith is a huge one. Right? I mean, Mr. Smith poured more than $1 million of his own money into one of the mayoral campaigns this year, right, in the form of a PAC, right, with no limitations on how much he poured into it. If he only has to make donations to 8 city council people instead of 14, and his money is going to be more needed by them because they need that money to send pieces of mail and to reach their neighbors and communicate effectively, then there's going to be more people coming to kiss the ring or whatever other part of his body that they appreciate. So, anyway, so like obviously for me, like if I had run in 4 years in a bigger first district, I feel confident that I will have done the work to earn your trust and to earn your support, and the bulk of the district will speak to the district I ran in this time. And so I think I'd be in a great position to win. So it's not like I have a personal anxiety that I would no longer serve on the city council, but I think I would be less effective as your council person, and I think the city overall would have lost some really important voices and perspectives and be a less democratic place.
Questions?
I just wanted to say I absolutely agree, because even if you just think about the math, it would make it twice as hard to reach out to your council person if you reduce the number of folks in the council. So having more folks who can represent us in city council sounds much better to me. I'm definitely voting for this.
And not to say, even on, sorry, I talked without raising my hand.
You're good.
Even on the one scenario where we've been emailing our council member, which is currently Zeke, about the vacant or the squatter property near us, the fact that he remembers it personally, and that we also talked to Zeke at a different community association meeting, and he knew of the property personally. Like that kind of interaction that we're able to get with our city council members probably wouldn't be the case if we only have 8.
Okay, so I just got the signal that we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but I just want to be clear here. It's question H, that's the one about changing the size of the city council. And voting no means you want it to stay at 14. Voting yes means you want to reduce it to 8. So I think if I, just make sure, Mark, you're advocating for no on H.
A good mnemonic device is the, the Natty Bo character. Just replace the B with an N. Just no.
Yeah.
No on
Or
H.
heck no to H.
Right.
It's already a great sticker.
Yeah, you can make that.
Tell all your friends and neighbors too. So.
I'd say the last thing I'd say on that too is that the city council has not always been a very effective legislative body. It's been a decent community service body, or community constituent response, but it hasn't been a place where a lot of big ideas to address big city issues have had substantive conversation and action. Councilperson Cohen plans to change that. I think he's going to have us in 9 committees, right? It's really hard to staff 9 committees with 14 people, let alone with 8, right? And so I think part of it is too that if we want the city to have an actual functional legislative body, then we need to have the people there with a variety of perspectives and also professional backgrounds and interests to be able to contribute to conversations.
Okay, we're getting kicked out, so.
Ernst, can I quickly just talk about the Lantern Parade? Lantern Parade's this Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Creative Alliance and Friends of Patterson Park putting it on. 10,000 people, lights going on right by Pulaski Monument. Bring family, bring friends, bring kids.
I plan to be there. It's gonna be great.
What time? It is the 25th anniversary. It starts at 4, but it has to be dark.
Yeah. And then one other quick announcement is that the state wants to hear from us. The state government wants to hear from us about the red line and potential routes. They are holding an open house at Creative Alliance this Thursday at 6. We'll make sure to put that out in the notes too. Okay, now we're gonna have to move outside if you want to continue this conversation. We definitely do actually hang out on the steps for a while to talk. But thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording of the Zoom, and that's a wrap. Thank you all for coming.